Hello friends, my name is Rajan Goel. I'm a registered migration agent at Aussizz Perth. We're going to talk about STEM occupations today and their PR pathways. So we're going to discuss some of the STEM occupations, the names of them, the skills assessment process, and some PR process regarding these occupations today. You're welcome to post your questions, and I'll try to answer them as much as I can during this session. So keep posting your questions, please. So as I said, we're gonna talk about the STEM occupations. So STEM occupations consist of science occupations, technological occupations, engineering occupations, and mathematics occupations. So under the science occupations, the popular ones are occupations such as laboratory scientist, laboratory technician, uh, microbiologists, uh, biotechnologists, life scientists, etc., etc. So these are pretty popular occupations that most of the international students come here to pursue in Australia. And then under the technology occupations, we've got all these ICT occupations such as developer, programmer, systems administrator, network administrator, software engineer, computer systems and network engineer, etc. Under the engineering occupations, we've all got these engineering occupations such as mechanical engineer, civil engineer. We've got engineering technologist. We've got engineering manager. We've got advanced diploma level occupations such as network planner, telecommunications network planner, etc., etc. Under the mathematics occupations, there are not many popular occupations that people pursue, but I'll tell you the skill assessment criteria for them in a second. So, of course, you can pursue all these occupations, you can study for them inside Australia, but for PR pathways, you need more than just the study. So you need to get the skills assessment for all these occupations before you can qualify for any of the PR pathways under any of these occupations. So for example, because you've just done Masters of Biotechnology from Australia, you cannot call yourself a biotechnologist. Or because you've just studied Masters of Engineering or Bachelors of Engineering from Australia, you cannot call yourself a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer, etc. So you must have a skills assessment for all of these occupations before you can actually nominate these occupations in your PR pathways. So various occupations have various skills assessing bodies. Every skill assessing body might have different criteria. Skills assessing body might have different criteria for different occupations that they assess themselves. For example, VetAssess may have different criteria for a biotechnologist than for some other occupation that VetAssess may assess. So you have to study the criteria which the skills assessing body publishes on their website very carefully and make sure that we meet that criteria uh, before we apply for the skills assessment, right? So I was talking about the science-based occupations. One of the popular ones is like a medical laboratory scientist. So the body which assesses this occupation is called AIMS. Now there's a certain criteria which you must fulfill in order to get a skills assessment for this occupation. So if you've done an accredited degree from Australia, like a bachelor's of medical laboratory science, then you can get the skills assessment pretty much straight away. Of course, you have to make an application to the skills assessing body, pay the relevant fee, and there could be English requirements as well. Like in this case, there are. You must have proficient English, which is 7 in all the components of IELTS or PTE. Only then you would be able to get a positive skills assessment. It's not like because you've done an accredited degree, you will get the skills assessment. You can consider yourself a laboratory scientist. You still have to get the confirmation, or you have to apply an application to the assessing body, and only after you get a positive skills assessment you can call yourself a laboratory scientist for the purposes of migration to Australia. Otherwise, doing a degree is not sufficient. For some of the other occupations under this branch are like, for example, biotechnologist, microbiologist, life scientist. Now, all these occupations are generally assessed by a body called VetAssess. VetAssess has a certain criteria for different occupations, as I was telling you earlier. So normally, VetAssess needs at least a minimum of 1 year of experience post qualification for you to be able to get a skills assessment for that occupation. So, for example, you've done Masters of Biotechnology from Australia. You must have at least 1 year of post-qualification work experience, which could be a minimum of 20 hours as well. And then you can get a skills assessment for this occupation from VETSS if that occupation is highly relevant to the duties listed under that occupation on ANSCO. Now, because VETSS only requires you to do 20 hours per week, the 1 year experience doesn't have to be full time. It only has to be more than 20 hours per week. So let's say, for example, you've done a bachelor's back home and you come here to study a master's and you don't have any experience yet. You can also complete the experience requirement while you're studying your master's and get a positive skills assessment from VETSS, because during the student visa, you can still work 24 hours a week, and that would be enough for you to be able to complete the requirement required for the 1 year experience in VETSS. All right, so that's the thing. And as I said, a number of these occupations are assessed by VETSS, and the criteria for all these science-based occupations remains the same for VETSS. Moving on to occupations under technology, which are most of the ICT occupations. The body which assesses these occupations is ACS, which is Australian Computer Society. Now, ACS has also got a certain criteria to assess these occupations. If you've done your degree in Australia, then which is relevant. Let's say you've done Bachelor's of IT or Masters of IT, and you want to get a skills assessment for developer programmer, then you must have some of the relevant subjects, and you must have studied relevant subjects in your degree here. For example, developer programmer would need some programming. So you must have studied programming subjects or units in your degree or in your course inside Australia. After that, you must have at least 1 year of experience in the related field, like you should have worked as a developer programmer, or you must do a professional year before you would be able to qualify for an ACS skills assessment for these ICT occupations. Now, that's just for the Australian degree. So if you studied inside Australia, you just need to have either 1 year of experience after your qualifications or a professional year, and you can get a skills assessment for these occupations. But if you've studied this degree from outside Australia, then of course, professional year is not an option. You can only do a professional year if you've studied inside Australia and done an IT major degree. But if you studied an IT degree from outside Australia, you need a minimum of 2 years of experience, which again doesn't need to be full time. ACS only requires that your experience be more than 20 hours per week and not full time. So but if you've done a degree outside Australia, you must have a minimum of 2 years of experience before you can qualify for ACS skills assessment for any ICT occupation. Now, 2 years experience requirement is a bare minimum. And there are other factors also, like, for example, if your degree is not closely related to the occupation that you're trying to seek the skills assessment for, then you might need 4 years of experience instead of 2 years. But 2 years of experience only works when your degree is also both the degree and the skills and the work experience are closely related to the occupation that you're nominating for the skills assessment. So this is ICT. ACS, other things are there as well. So example, if you've not done a bachelor's degree from overseas and you're only relying on your advanced diploma or your diploma or associate degree, then again the experience requirement increases and you must have more years of experience for you to be able to get the skills assessment. Or if you've done an ICT, non-ICT degree, then also the experience requirement increases and you might have to go through a different pathway, which is called RPL pathway, under which you have to submit some project reports as well to ACS. So there are different criteria based on how closely your degree is related to the occupation and whether the degree is at a required level, and based on how your experience is related to the nominated occupation or not. So these are the criteria for the ICT occupations which are assessed by ACS. Now, if we move on to engineering occupations, now most of the engineering occupations are assessed by a body called Engineers Australia. So they have a criteria. Just because you've studied engineering degree from back home or inside Australia doesn't mean that you are eligible for like an occupation under the PR pathways. So you must apply for a skills assessment to Engineers Australia, and after this, give you a positive outcome, you can apply for PR pathway under the GSM or employer-sponsored pathways. So for Engineers Australia, the criteria is that if your degree is accredited, then you just have to apply and make an application, and they will give you a positive skills assessment. But if your degree is not accredited, then you have to go through what they call is CDR pathway. So under CDR pathway, you have to make 3 career episodes based on any projects that you might have done during your engineering, or any employment episodes that you might have done during your engineering or after your engineering degree. So CDR pathway, as I said, you have to write 3 career episodes. Career episodes are basically essays of 1,000 to 1,500 words, where you explain your knowledge to Engineers Australia, so that they are satisfied that you've got enough knowledge about the occupation that you're trying to seek the skills assessment for. All right. So as I said, all engineering occupations are assessed by Engineers Australia under the accredited pathway, whether your degree is accredited under Australian pathway, or under the Washington Accord, or under the Dublin Accord, or under the Sydney Accord. If your degree is listed there, it is accredited. All you have to do is submit a skills assessment under the accredited pathway, and you can get a skills. Of course, there are English requirements as well. If you've studied 2 years in Australia, you might be exempted from English. But if you haven't, then you have to have at least a minimum of 6 in all the components of either IELTS or PTE before you can apply for the skills assessment to Engineers Australia. All right. So these are the occupations that are assessed by Engineers Australia. So as I said, these are the most popular occupations that we come across on a daily basis that international students study here and are normally seeking the skills assessment for under the STEM category. So I've got a question: civil engineer with 80 points for 190 and 70 points for 491, including state points onshore. What are the chances? Well, the thing is that depends on which state you are in. If you are in WA, civil engineer is a priority occupation at the moment, as they've done with some of the other occupations as well under the construction field. So we'll know when the invitation rounds get started, which could be very soon. There could be an invitation round either today also, as they were saying that there's going to be an invitation round in the first week of August. It hasn't happened yet. But yeah, we are hoping that civil engineers will get invited. But at the same time, the competition is hard at the moment, and there are a lot of EOIs for civil engineer in the system. So I would recommend to increase your points by as much as you can, so that you have the best chance of getting invited. So if you've got 7 each in IELTS, go for 8 each. And if you haven't given NATI, give NATI if you obviously know the language, a second language. So increase your points by as much as you can, so that you've got the best chance of getting invited. But civil engineer is definitely a priority occupation. So I would say an okay chance to get invited. And those of you who are only going for 190 and 491, or like instead of 491, I would recommend go for both 190 and 491 to maximize your chances of getting invited. Something is always better than nothing. A lot of people come to me that we only want 190. Well, I would tell them that with the existing competition in the market, with the existing number of students that have already applied for the expression of interest, we don't have the luxury to choose between 491 and 190 at the moment. So go put an EOI for both these subclasses, so that you can maximize your chances. So yes, so as I was telling, we've discussed the skills assessment criteria for the skills STEM occupations. So after you've got a skills assessment, now the next step is that you have to lodge your expression of interest. That I'm only talking about general skilled migration here. I'll touch briefly upon the employer-sponsored visas as well. But under the general skilled migration, which are subclass 189, subclass 190, or subclass 491, you have to lodge an expression of interest after you get your skills assessment. So expression of interest is basically telling the state body or the Department of Home Affairs that, okay, I've got these many points, and invite me. So you basically stand in the queue and tell the government that I've got these many points. so that they could invite you. So you have to make sure in the expression of interest that you claim the right points, because if you end up claiming the wrong points in the expression of interest, it could have very grave consequences, and the consequences could come into picture very late. So you might be able to even lodge the visa with incorrect points, but after a year, when they come back to you saying that the points claimed were not correct, then you might not be able to actually get the visa, and you might just have to let it go. So there are very grave consequences of not, although expression of interest seems fairly simple to fill, but I've seen people make a lot of mistakes claiming incorrect points, and then they sort of end up regretting that. So make sure, I'm not saying you must use professional help, but if you're not 100% sure, I would say expression of interest stage is very important, and you must use professional help if you are not 100% sure regarding the points that you're trying to claim. So yeah, as I said, we put an expression of interest. Now the expression of interest can be submitted for the state-sponsored visas, which are subclass 190 and 491. Expression of interest can be submitted for the subclass 189, which is an independent visa. It is not state-sponsored. And expression of interest can be submitted for family-sponsored visas as well, such as subclass 491. So all these categories are there under the general skill migration, for which you can submit the expression of interest for. For obviously the state-sponsored visa, which are 190 and 491, you have to make sure that you not only have the points, but you also meet the state criteria. Now, there are various state criteria. Every state has their own criteria. So you must understand and you must read that criteria carefully before lodging an expression of interest. Otherwise, there's no point really. You will get your application refused. For example, Victoria wants you to be living in Victoria for you to be able to apply for the expression of interest or ROI for Victoria. If you're not living in Victoria, you will never be successful in getting it. Even if they invite you, you would not be able to get a successful state nomination outcome from them. So, and of course, your occupation should be on a state list. So every state has their own occupation list as well. An occupation that is available in Victoria or in WA might not be available in Tasmania or in Northern Territory. So you have to make sure that your occupation is on the list as well. So yeah, as I said, so for 190 and 491 under the state-sponsored category, make sure you meet the state criteria. Your occupation is on that state's list for which you are applying the expression of interest for, and then only once you get invited, you would be able to get a successful state nomination. And then under the independent category, the only criteria is that you must have points, which are the minimum is 65 points. And your occupation should be on a list called medium and long-term strategic skill list. So there's a list which is published on the departmental website as well. If your occupation is on there and you've got a minimum of 65 points, you can lodge an expression of interest for that. But the competition is fairly high under that category, which is subclass 189. And of course, family sponsor stream is there. Again, for family sponsor stream, your occupation should be on the MLT SSN list, and you should have an eligible relative living in regional part of Australia, and then only you could be eligible under that stream. So these are the subclass 190, 491, 189 visas. So you have to make sure that you're eligible and you lodge all the relevant EOIs that you're eligible for, so that you can maximize your chances of getting invited. And you could get invited from either the state sponsor under the state sponsor category, or under the independent category, or under the family sponsored category. So yes. And then once you have lodged your expression of interest, of course, you will get invited if you obviously exceed the competition, because it is a points-based system, and whoever's got higher points normally gets invited. Although that might not be the case for every state-sponsored visa. As I said, some of the states prefer give higher priority to some other factors than just the points. For example, NSW could say that if you've been working in NSW for 1 year, you would get priority, and it doesn't, regardless of how many points you have. So somebody who's like got 100 points might not get invited, but somebody who's been working there for 1 year would get invited. So after you know this criteria, you can also make yourselves eligible, even if you're not eligible right now, even if you are not in the under the priority criteria right now, you can work on it and make yourself sort of eligible for that priority category, so that you can get invited sooner than later. So these are all the GSM visas that you must lodge your expression of interest for, and this can only happen once you have a skills assessment for a certain occupation, which is on the state list or on the MLTSSL list. All right. The other option is that you could always apply for the employer-sponsored visas. Um, People are going a lot towards that category under the employer-sponsored visas. Now the biggest advantage of that category is that you don't have to wait for an invitation before you can apply such visas. As long as you've got the relevant experience and you've got an employer who needs you in that position in their business and who's willing to sponsor you, you can just simply apply that visa pretty much straight away, rather than waiting for the rather than lodging an expression of interest and waiting for the invitation to come, which might never come. So basically, if you're skilled enough and if you found yourself an employer who needs you and who's willing to sponsor you, and mostly employers will sponsor you if they need you in the business, right? So that kind of so and now for the TSS visa, which is subclass 482 visa, the requirement is the experience requirement, which used to be 2 years before. The minister has already announced that from 24th of November 2024, the experience requirement is going to come down to 1 year instead of the 2 years as is applicable as of today. So instead of 2 years, we are going to have 1 year experience required for the TSS skill visa, which is not much really, because even if you've studied from Australia and do not have any prior experience back in your home countries in the relevant occupations, you can still use your postgraduate visa to gain that experience and then get nominated by an employer for one of the employer-sponsored visas. All right. So under the employer-sponsored visa category, we've got subclass 482. As I said, the experience requirement might only be just 1 year of full-time experience for that particular visa. Of course, you have to have relevant qualifications as well. There are other requirements as well, that you must have a certain amount of English. You must pass health and character checks, of course. So this is a temporary visa which will lead to PR, possibly after 2 years. There are other employer-sponsored visas as well, such as subclass 186, which is a permanent visa. So if you have 3 years of experience full-time after your qualifications, and you find an employer who's willing to sponsor you, like for example, you have a skills assessment for a chef, and you find an employer who's willing to sponsor you as a chef, you've already got 3 years of experience, full-time experience as a chef after your Cert 4, then you can straight away get sponsored for 186, which is a permanent visa. And after that permanent visa, you have no obligation to work for that employer also. Although I'm not saying that you should leave your employer, but you are under no obligation to continue working for that employer, and you can simply become PR pretty quickly if you got the relevant 3 years of experience. Of course, you have to meet certain other criteria, like your occupation should be on the MLTSSL list if you're going for direct 186, and there are other criteria too. And there's another visa which is subclass 494. Now there are a number of occupations, occupations which are not eligible for either 482 or 186 at the moment. Now 494 employer-sponsored visa is for people who are located in regional areas or whose employers are basically located in regional areas, and they're getting sponsored from a business which is located in regional part of Australia. Now the occupation list that is applicable for the 494 visa is called regional occupation list. There are a lot many occupations on the regional occupation list than what we have on the normal 482 and 186 visa. So if you do not see yourself qualifying under the normal employer-sponsored visa, you might just see yourself qualifying under the subclass 494 visa, and that way you could still be eligible for PR pathway later on after getting that visa. All right, so I've got a question here. What about community worker or welfare worker? What are the chances moving to WA, or better to stay in NSW 80 points? See, community worker, I am based in WA at the moment. Community worker is again a priority occupation in WA, We saw a lot of community worker invitations last year, and at 80 points, I don't know whether you're talking about 491 or 190 here, but at 80 points, I would still say that you've got fairly good chances of getting invited as a community worker. I'm assuming that you've already got a skills assessment and you're eligible to lodge your expression of interest. Then yes, WA has this occupation on its priority list, and I know for a fact that for the past few years, community workers are getting invited at very low points. But again, this year the competition is higher as compared to some of the previous years, because we were going through COVID and there were not many people here. But still, community workers, I would say, has a good chance of getting invited. Much better than NSW, I would say. MPA, Masters of Professional Accounting graduate with 85 points, 491. Accounting is going to be tough, although you've got a chance, but 85 points might not be sufficient. So go for higher PT, higher English score, or any other way you can increase your score. I would suggest 95 points should be a decent score to get invited. But definitely accounting is on the WA list, both under the general stream and the graduate stream. So if you're graduated from WA, of course you're eligible. But even if you haven't graduated from WA, you're still eligible under the accountant occupation, or external auditor, or the management accountant, or taxation accountant, and so on. Should I move to the see? You have to weigh your options. I'm telling you, saying WA, I think, in my opinion, WA has got a better chance of giving you an invitation in this occupation that you're talking about. But at the same time, you have to weigh your options, all your options, and discuss and think about it properly whether you want to move out of NSW or not. As I said, the employer-sponsored pathway is always there. So if you find yourself an employer who's willing to sponsor you, that's probably the best method to rely on, rather than waiting for an invitation. Or you could just simply try and increase your score by as much as you can. Of course, that increases your chances of getting invited too. So yes, so these were the STEM occupations. So moving forward, you need to study for the occupation. Of course, you have to have the relevant qualifications. And of course, get a skills assessment, lodge your expression of interest, gain the relevant experience if you can, because relevant experience will not only make you eligible for the employer-sponsored visas, but will also make you some of the states prefer that you have that relevant experience, and they will probably prioritize you as far as inviting you is concerned. What about counselors with positive skills assessment based on offshore experience? Well, if you've already got I would say counselor is a very in-demand occupation. I think you've got a great chance of getting invited, especially if you've already got the skills assessment. Now, getting a skills assessment is normally hard, and that is why the competition is not much in this occupation. I think you've got a fair chance of getting invited from every state in Australia in this particular occupation. Anyway, friends, my name was Rajan Goel. You're more than welcome to post your queries in the description link there at the bottom of your screens, or you can shoot me an inquiry. You can contact us in the Perth CBD office. We've got 3 other offices in Perth. So more than welcome to contact us anytime you like for any of your queries. All right, best of luck for your migration pathway in Australia. Thank you.